I am not the man I was meant to be, and I have only just understood why. A secret has been set in motion that cannot be undone. Now the quiet ends and the storm arrives. The sound of the woman's groans stopped. Seol-Hwi held the sword and looked around, noticing how the gamblers watched them with interest. He could feel the gaze of Chang's 6 guards as well. Seol-Hwi looked at their weapons. They had a club, a mace, and a scythe-like sword. From the ring, which looked like a cog wheel, to dozens of blades on the tip of the club. Just looking at them, the menacing weapons caught Seol-Hwi's eyes. Interesting. Seol-Hwi clicked his tongue. Ordinary people would be intimidated when they saw such weapons, but it wasn't like that for him. In fact, he knew that such lethal weapons are rarely used by warriors in true battles. One of the lessons he learned in the sect was that the people who use flashy weapons die at the start. The reason why they mainly use swords, blades, fists, or daggers is to be effective in combat. "What are you doing?" Was it annoying seeing him just standing and looking around? Chang's sick urged him on. At that, Seol-Hwi turned his head. The woman in the corner. As if her nose had been broken, the woman covered her face with both hands. She remained motionless, not moving. Seol-Hwi approached the woman, looked down on her, and asked, "Do you realize how reckless you were? How dare you waste your only life for this? Stupid." Seol-Hwi's behavior seemed nonsensical to others. Well, it was because the man he was disguised as would never do something like this. "What is with him?" There were shouts from behind, but Seol-Hwi waited patiently, because he wanted to hear her answer. "It might look like that in your eyes, you beasts." Perhaps she had calmed down a little, or maybe she felt desperate, but she opened her mouth. "I'm not only after justice for the death of my father. Even a weak girl can wield a blade, and that blade of revenge is never dull. That is what brought this onto you." Seol-Hwi pointed the current situation out. In the end, such unrestrained emotions caused her death. "I have no regrets, if there are any. It's that I found out too late. If I could travel back in time, I would do the same thing again." "What is she saying?" A disgruntled voice from behind. It was a man with a chubby face and a grumpy attitude standing next to Chang's sick. "Come on, kill me." This time the woman screamed too. Seol-Hwi met her eyes for a moment, and when he saw her expression, he felt uneasy. Is she hiding her feelings? Just a day ago, when he met her in another place, her eyes looked different. If she really is this woman who was wounded so badly, such emotions in the wake of her imminent demise couldn't have been hidden. So he didn't like this. Her eyes filled with determination. Even though she knew it was reckless, she rushed ahead to get what she wanted. It was like the Seol-Hwi of the past. "How were you planning to hire an assassin?" Seol-Hwi asked seriously. "To get revenge for your father, you would have had to pay a high price." There was a slight confusion in her determined eyes. It was a natural reaction, because she didn't think this would be brought up. "Well, let's talk about that. After all, they're not the type of people who work with just advance payments, and it depends on the situation." Seol-Hwi, gripping the handle, swung his sword while loosening his stiff muscles, and then changing his face and body's appearance to his own. Time to take care of everything. Although his enemies were releasing killing intent, turn-based combat didn't trigger. Well, it's probably because they aren't even strong enough for it to be triggered. "Die, I'll take you down." The men rushed towards Seol-Hwi with battle cries, around 25, surrounding the boss, Chang's sick, and 16 around the gambling table. Each of them had those vicious weapons. Seol-Hwi smiled and gestured. "Shall I come to you, or you to me?" Everyone paused at the absurd question. Then, with Chang's sick's nod, his men ran ahead. One tried to bludgeon Seol-Hwi with the bladed club. His blow headed straight for his target. It tickles. But the opponent didn't fall despite the hit. Rather, the subsequent attack. Seol-Hwi's fist pierced his stomach, and the man flew back to the wall. 4 more came running for him. Another club, a sledgehammer, and there were also metal nunchucks inlaid with iron nails, and a stick with an iron ball on it. Seol-Hwi moved back and grabbed the iron ball which was thrown at him. And when it was pulled back, the man holding the handle was dragged along with it. In the meantime, the club and sledgehammer came in. Seol-Hwi didn't avoid them. They were blocked by both his hands and then pushed away. In the same breath, Seol-Hwi took the sword of reverence at his side and used it to slash at his opponent. The scythe-shaped sword coming for Seol-Hwi fell to the ground as its wielder was cut. "Ack!" Seol-Hwi didn't stop. He placed his hand on the man who was cut down and shouted, "Wind God attack!" Kwang. The Wind God technique was used. A huge force of wind erupted from the enemy's body and the corpse was torn apart. Those who witnessed the attack stopped in their tracks. Seol-Hwi turned to them. "Come on now, I'm done warming up." And he looked at the stunned woman in the corner. "Now count the numbers." "By then, I would have taken all of them down, excluding one." The woman didn't answer. Without even realizing it, she began to count. "What are you doing?" "Go," Chang-sik cried out, but his men didn't move. Even though he was their superior, they didn't want to die such a brutal death. "So you won't come then?" Seol-Hwi brushed off the blood on the tip of his sword and said, "Then I will come." Seol-Hwi jumped between them in an instant. "Q-ack! Ack!" Pain screams could be heard. It was their last words as the guards' throats were slit. No one could see where the attack was coming from and where Seol-Hwi was going. They were being attacked from every angle. "Q-ack!" Some screamed as they were covered in flames. Seol-Hwi was using his newly learnt technique. What? However, what was more shocking was the swordsmanship that followed. Countless lines moved in the air like lightning. When Seol-Hwi stopped, the throats of 10 people were cut. Plum blossom swordsmanship. Seol-Hwi was using the technique he learned from Geum Man-jung. 10 down. Only Chang-sik was left. Seol-Hwi approached him and spoke with a friendly face. "What do you think? Still think this sword is good?" "Ah." He looked around and then kneeled before Seol-Hwi. "Spare me, please. I didn't know I was in the presence of such a powerful person." Seol-Hwi looked at him in curiosity, but the man didn't care and kept begging him. "I don't have a face. If I get to live, I will do anything. I won't speak as you take the woman. No, I will leave all of this to you. If I die, there will be people chasing after you. Of course, there is someone who might beat you. Do you really need to make such a situation? I beg you." Seol-Hwi was taken aback at this strange way of begging for your life. But he thought as he nodded. These were valid words. If he killed the boss of the red light district, the others associated with him would search for the killer. Then, as he said, more troublesome things will be pulling him in. "But that woman wants you to die?" "True, but think about it. If it wasn't me, someone else would have killed her father. I just happened to be the first one." That too made sense. Even if it wasn't Chang-sik, someone working in the same sphere would have killed her father. Isn't it the fault of the father who gambled everything? Then, the woman... It was then. Just when he was about to turn away, this suddenly appeared. "Looks like a certain someone was trying to launch a sneak attack. You idiot." Seol-Hwi chose without another thought. "Attack has been selected." Something was thrown from Chang-sik's hand. Seol-Hwi faced it head-on. "Quang, ha ha ha, you fool!" Chang-sik smiled brightly, a grenade just in case. He had hidden this in his sleeve for any unexpected situation which might occur. Anyone hit by it would be instantly killed. "How dare you?" Ah. When the smoke cleared away, Chang-sik coughed. A hand covered in frost could be seen. Seol-Hwi was using the white light body martial arts technique. "Did you think that would kill me?" Ha, and that was the end. Seol-Hwi's sword easily cut Chang-sik's neck, and with blood on his blade, Seol-Hwi turned to look at the woman. She struggled. She spoke in a low voice. "I have no money." This man was a monster. She had never seen such a strong person. "All my money was taken away." "Money?" Seol-Hwi interrupted her. "No, I want you to tell me." "About what?" Seol-Hwi smiled. "About the lower district sect, 1. She said her name was Haran. She was around 16 when she was sold to someone due to her father's gambling debts. Because of her appearance, she was sold again to a famous person when she turned 17. However, it took less than a year to rise to a second-class courtesan. When she was around 18, she caught the eyes of the red light district and was sold once more. The boss, Chang-sik, recognized that she was the same one sold in the past. So out of curiosity or because he saw profit, he paid a high price again and brought her into his business. But getting this to happen was her intention. Haran, who had already paid off all the debts before turning 18 using her beauty, investigated the reason for her father's gambling, borrowing money, and his horrible death. She soon found out that everything was done by Chang-sik and his men and approached them, and after taking their money, she tried to employ an assassin. "I didn't think he would die." At this restaurant, Haran confided about her past to Seol-Hwi. On the way, they had met a doctor and had her wounds treated, so the swelling on her face had gone down. "Are you saying the assassin you hired was killed by Chang-sik?" Seol-Hwi asked, not understanding. Haran shook her head. "No, the target of the assassin I hired was higher than that." Another person who works in the red light district and manages usury 1. Killing Chang Sik was going to be done after that. Seol-Hwi didn't say anything, but he could guess who the target was. Geum Man-jung. The red light district around this place isn't without his influence. Moreover, if it was loaning money, he had to be involved. I still can't believe it. I heard that this assassin never failed, but then he was left in a junkyard with his body mutilated. Her voice trembled as she remembered that incident. She had to take deep breaths to calm herself. Well, Seol-Hwi closed his mouth. He thought about it for a moment. Getting rid of the boss of the red light district isn't an easy task. In these back alley streets, a hierarchy is observed. If someone like Chang Sik is killed, the murderer will be pursued. From the assassin to the one who requested the kill, they will be hunted down. So, after eliminating the actual person who attacked Chang Sik, it would be fitting to remove the one who ordered them. But the problem is Geum Man-jung. Seol-Hwi knew a couple things about the man and the warriors around Geum Man-jung. The people who helped him recently were the Crimson Demon Pavilion. As a result, Seol-Hwi's subordinates died because of not knowing the skills of their opponents, and he was killed too. You hired an assassin through the lower district sect. That's right. How do you feel about it? It's a place where betrayal goes around, but that is also why there are strong bonds too. Seol-Hwi didn't doubt this. It started because of her father's debt, but the fact that she survived for several years in this cruel world, she isn't a weak woman. But, Heron raised her head and asked Seol-Hwi, why do you want to see the lower district sect branch leader? She remembered the first thing Seol-Hwi had said to her when they arrived at this restaurant. In return for saving her, he wanted to meet the people in charge of the lower district sect. If possible, it had to be the person with the highest position. So Heron was curious. I have something I need to find out. I said this before, but it won't be easy. I heard that the leader never goes out of his way unless he's interested in something. No need to worry about that. He'll definitely want to meet with me. Huh. When Seol-Hwi said this so casually, Heron looked at him curiously. Why was he so confident? Seol-Hwi looked above Heron's head. The words which were there before had vanished. The lower district sect. The reason why Seol-Hwi had come here, talked with Heron, and did all this. He needed info on the current situation from a third party. As a group that buys and sells information, they will reduce the time it takes to get it and increase the reliability of the information. A guard of the Supreme Pavilion protecting Geum Man-jung. When and to what extent did they get close? And what is the relationship between them and Mount Hua? What too is the relationship between the Blue Dragon sect leader Baek Yang-chun and Geum Man-jung? Every question needed to be answered. I'll make my move after knowing this. The reason why Seol-Hwi came to Sichuan. Because of that information, he can try and remove those who interfered with the mission in advance. When Seol-Hwi was young, he heard many stories about the lower district sect, a place which circulates a vast amount of information from around the nation. The lower district sect is the only intelligence-gathering sect which can be compared to the Beggars' Union. Perhaps, in certain areas, they are even superior. This is because there are far too many people who risk their lives for even a small amount of money when they are poor. Seol-Hwi could now understand it. He turned his teacup upside down, crossed his chopsticks, and waited for a while. How long was it? Heron's gaze shifted to the old woman who suddenly appeared. The old woman stood next to Seol-Hwi with a stick and tapped him on the shoulder. Follow me? Ah, Heron couldn't help gasping. The branch sect leader, the one whom Heron could have never met, now wanted to see Seol-Hwi. You, stay seated. Heron nodded at the old woman's words. A meeting with the sect leader. Heron had no intention of going with them. After exiting the restaurant and walking along the side road, they entered a splendid building. They were greeted with the sight of an artificial pond and a running water fountain. Being able to create a pond like this indoors was quite amazing. Seol-Hwi became curious about the person with such a luxurious sense of interior decoration. You're here, the man turned around. Surprisingly, he was young. It was shocking for Seol-Hwi, who always saw sect leaders and branch leaders as old. I understand. Everyone is quite confused when they meet me for the first time. A smile could be seen on the face of the handsome man. In fact, he might even be more handsome than the Earth Demon. He was beautiful and gave off a calming aura. If one is a leader at a young age, shouldn't they have their own order and weapons? Come, have a seat. The young man guided Seol-Hwi to the table next to the pond. As soon as Seol-Hwi sat down, he was asked, "Are you the person? Why do you think that? Even when we try to research, nothing comes out." He paused and continued. "The only information we have is that you came here by a horse-drawn carriage, and nothing more. In this case, I usually take a slightly different method of investigation. Rather than focus on where you came from, it was on figuring out what you did here. And how did that turn out? I've heard information that you dealt with the red light district boss Chang Sik. It was apparently to save Harren, but it must have been with the intention to meet us. So the answer I came up with is this. Depending on what you ask me, I think I might know where you come from." "Oh," Seol-Hwi rubbed his chin. This was fun. Clearly, this man had all the information from this area on hand. "Then tell me." Since his opponent came forward like this, Seol-Hwi thought that there was no need to drag this out. "Do you know a person named Sang Chenjang around Geum Man-jung?" Instantly, his eyes fluttered. His face was rigid. It was a natural reaction. After all, in the Central Plains, the name of the demonic sect can't be taken lightly. "No, whatever it is you're thinking, you're right." The young man had difficulty managing his expressions, and it's probably not just because he was facing someone from the demonic sect. A demonic sect member asking for information about another demonic sect member. In other words, the man assumed that there was a struggle for power within the demonic sect, so he looked even more confused. "It's embarrassing. To say this from my mouth might come out, like an internal struggle exists within the sect." Seol-Hwi felt the need to capitalize on the situation to get what he wanted. "But the risk is great. The cost will be great too. Geum Man-jung is from our side." The young man was silent, but Seol-Hwi knew the silence right now wasn't just that. Whether he liked it or not, he was already in the midst of the demonic sect's issues. Depending on what the young man chooses, his fate will change completely. "Ha, I always have good luck with such things." The young man smiled, but Seol-Hwi knew that it wasn't genuine. "Can I ask you one thing?" "Sure." "How much do you know?" Seol-Hwi understood where this was going. How much do you know? It's the question of what kind of force are you within the demonic sect. It also implied that this would be what he thinks about when it comes to helping Seol-Hwi or not. "Well, as far as what moves Geum Man-jung's disciple Geum Man-jung makes." The young man abruptly stood up. It must have been hard to believe because he kept staring at Seol-Hwi. Who are you?" he asked with a stiff face. His tone had changed to a more respectful one than before. Well, this was bound to happen. To mention the elder of Mount Hua was no different from saying he was no ordinary member of the sect. "Let's just call me a pursuer. Geum Man-jung's disciple Geum Man-jung. And the plot of that disciple to take the place of the Blue Dragon sect leader. Seol-Hwi will be able to know what relationship they had with Sang Chenjang. So, what do you think? Would you like to work with me?" The first person Seol-Hwi decided to recruit for his purpose was the lower district sect branch leader in front of him. In a room with a gorgeously engraved image of a dragon on the ceiling, Geum Man-jung opened a safe, which was installed in a large drawer protected by a circular lock. He opened his mouth to speak after he had filled the safe up. "Come in." When the permission was granted, a man opened the door and strode in. In the name of protecting him, he was put on escort duty. "What is it?" "I'm just here to talk. We've tentatively agreed to give 5 locations." "Ah, I see." Geum Man-jung's expression went stiff. That meant it was decided to hand over several shops, including the clothing store, to the Blue Dragon sect. Moreover, he knew very well that it couldn't be stopped. Didn't they even ask him to hand over the entire area a month ago? "Don't be too heartbroken. Now isn't the time to fight. They won't last long anyway." "I know that, but when will help come? It's been quite some time since I contacted the sect." It had been around half a year since he asked for help from the Hidden Truth Corps. Still, nothing had been heard from them. On the other hand, the Blue Dragon sect has grown considerably. Its influence extends beyond the area and into managing businesses now too. Moreover, the cost of protection in the red light district has become an issue recently. Wait. In any case, the matter will be resolved once the Hidden Truth Corps are dispatched. "Yes, I hope so." Geum Man-jung let out a short sigh. He too believed this. He knew how strong the people of the Hidden Truth Corps were. He raised his gaze in thought of something and asked, "But did you look into that person from yesterday?" At his question, Sang Chenjang nodded. It didn't look like he belonged to the Blue Dragon sect. "Then is it someone from the Mount Hua sect? Didn't you say that traces of Mount Hua's swordsmanship was on the bodies of the dead?" I thought that too. However, upon investigation, it turns out that he isn't from there. Then from where is he? It doesn't make sense that an unknown warrior did that to save a girl. Ha, Geum Man-jung sighed. A person who suddenly intervened in a complicated situation. In addition to interfering with his business, he injured and killed dozens of people. It was very uncomfortable for Geum Man-jung. Don't worry. I traced his moves and found his current location. Ah! At that, Geum Man-jung's face brightened, and the other man nodded as if it was no big deal. By now, my men must have already gone after his head. The heavenly official guards. Seol-Hwi, a commander of strong build, listened to his captain's orders and headed for the tavern located on the edge of the red light district. This place, right? It has to be. As they stood at the entrance, Seol-Hwi picked up his bamboo hat, looked around, and nodded his head. The 9 others followed him. Step, step. One man and one woman in the center of the tavern, no one other than them. When he raised his hand, his men following him stopped. Seol-Hwi glanced behind himself once more and then strode towards the man and woman. And as he stood next to the woman, he questioned her. Name? The woman didn't answer. She sat there saying nothing. Then he took out a parchment from his sleeve. He examined the portraits on it, comparing them to the faces of the man and woman in front of him. He smiled. They're the ones. SRNG. As if waiting for that moment, the subordinate beside him pulled out his sword from its sheath. With eerie sounds, the blades of the rest came out. Don't kill the man, he has to be captured alive. Yes. After the order was given, the parchment was put back into his sleeve. Seol-Hwi turned around and began walking away. Did Xianxia send you? The man sitting opposite to the woman suddenly spoke up. Seol-Hwi stiffened, slowly turning back to look at them. A man sitting cross-legged was looking at the floor. And the woman who was on the other side, who finally opened her mouth to speak. Can this be one? Her voice was terrified. On the other hand, the man's voice contained nothing but arrogance. They're barely even worth my time. Their power seems much lower than I thought. After that, something terrifying came. The energy Seol-Hwi felt from the man gripped his entire body. Still, he was a member of the heavenly official guards. He couldn't show his fear, so he tried to maintain an upright posture. But with his intuition telling him it was dangerous, he quickly shouted. Hurry up! 4 guards rushed at the man, but that was all they could do. Seol-Hwi's ears caught the sound of something strange in the air, before things began to fall down like a lie. Seol-Hwi's eyes widened. 4 of his men had died without even being able to use their weapons or attacks. It was because of this man whose strength they couldn't dare to confirm. At that moment, the man stood up from his seat. He sauntered towards Seol-Hwi. You're from the Crimson Demon Pavilion? What? What's so surprising about that? A unit called the Heavenly Official Guards. Didn't you move with Xianxia on the orders of the Supreme Pavilion Lord? Seol-Hwi was more and more bewildered. However, hearing all of his affiliations come out correctly, he guessed that the other man had to be of the same sect. Don't get me wrong, I'm from Mount Hua. You expect me to believe that? Don't believe it if you don't want to. Seol-Hwi looked around before continuing to talk. Well, it isn't like you'll be able to survive for much longer. When Seol-Hwi decided to fight properly, a number of gaps could be seen. His only choice for so many gaps was to attack. There was a reason. The advantage of going back 3 seconds in time. He was planning to use that as an opportunity for the plum blossom sword technique. The sword marks would stay on the dead bodies. After dealing with them, Xianxia would come. He would see these marks and be confused, perhaps even start to doubt Geum Man-jung. Hack, swish, blood spilled out. The warriors in the tavern couldn't fight and had their necks and arms blown away. Some fell after being stabbed dozens of times by Seol-Hwi's attack. What stood out the most among them? Bang! They died without even recognizing the shape of the explosions. It's an attack that is difficult to determine whether it is plus blossom swordsmanship or a martial art. Seol-Hwi stood in the center of all of it. Drip, drip. Looking at the blood flowing down his sword, he asked, Shouldn't you at least resist a bit? Seol-Hwi lowered his head. His eyes were mixed with numerous emotions, but one thing was sure, the will to fight. Health, 310,000 internal energy, 410,000 combat power, 450,000 plus divine weapon ghost sword. Is that it? Seol-Hwi's eyes turned to the sword the man was holding. The sword was unusual. It felt like it was crying during the fight, the sound of that sword. The ghost sword of Seol-Hwi, a weapon known to go after blood. It was said that if the sword is swung, it gets stronger and more destructive each time. The sword had to be what he was confident about, and with this sword the thought of losing might not come. Let's see how great it is. Seol-Hwi lowered his own sword and provoked Seol-Sawu, watching as the man furrowed his brows. Seol-Hwi knew that his provocation and careless attitude would make the man try to use this. Sheeing, Seol-Sawu used the ghost sword to cut his wrists and the back of his arms. Then, after soaking the blade with his blood, he licked it. Woong, and the sword cried again. Like the sound of wind rustling the walls in the middle of the night, the cry of the sword could be heard by Seol-Hwi. Don't make me regret it. They were just 2 meters apart from each other. Perhaps because of the short distance, the sword went for Seol-Hwi's throat in the blink of an eye. Then he turned it to the right, where Seol-Hwi had moved his neck to avoid it. Shing. As Seol-Hwi turned and fell back, he continued to move. The aggressive offense of trying to get the opponent down seemed as if the man didn't want to give any moment of peace to Seol-Hwi. Perhaps because of that, Seol-Hwi's eyes saw the sword moving the man, not the man moving the sword. Shall I get hit once? Seol-Hwi, who was half-turned and kept moving backward, lowered his body and rushed ahead. Seol-Sawu lowered his sword vertically, trying to split Seol-Hwi in half. Seol-Hwi hurriedly turned sideways to dodge the attack and then struck back with his own sword. Ching, UK, but Seol-Hwi was the one who was pushed back. Although his sword didn't fall short, the opponent's sword is known to be a divine weapon. In particular, the power of the sword, which he could feel, was different from a normal sword. At that moment, Seol-Hwi was surprised, and the opponent didn't miss his chance. The sword came from 3 directions, all of them unavoidable. Even so, Seol-Hwi didn't falter, because there was a skill gap between them that could not be narrowed with just a sword. Chak! Seol-Hwi's sword slashed diagonally, and before the movement could even change, something fell to the ground. It was Seol-Sawu's arm. This is why I like the plum blossom sword technique. Seol-Hwi spoke in a calm voice. When the opponent tried to make his move, he used the plum blossom sword technique. That speed. It was possible because his technique was several times faster than the speed of the opponent. Qek! After losing one of his arms, Seol-Sawu hesitated for a while as he knelt on the ground. Let me ask you one thing. Sorry, but no. He refused Seol-Hwi's words. Seol-Sawu knew what came after, the last blow. Then I will give you an honorable death. If the man was going to be stubborn, Seol-Hwi couldn't say anything more. Swish, Seol-Sawu's head was cut off as he met his fate in that kneeling position. What are you? The woman asked, covering her mouth. A man like Seol-Sawu was easily subdued. Seol-Hwi answered in a dry voice. Now you're free, you'd better leave soon. The captain of these guys will be here any moment. Do you have a place to escape? You're misunderstanding something. Seol-Hwi cleaned the blood off of his sword and sheathed it. He looked at her and said, "The hunt starts now." Seol-Hwi felt a sharp pain as the bones in his face rearranged themselves after reversing his technique. He soon returned to his own appearance and took out the mask of Sang Chenjang from his sleeves. And only after he put on the mask did he breathe a sigh of relief. Phew! The situation was more dangerous than he expected. Kwang Suong even managed to get past his defense. If there was any other mistake, the enemy's sword might have managed to pierce his abdomen. And that sudden increase in combat power? It was wholly unexpected. Combat power rising in the middle of a fight. Previously, there was a plus mark, so he went into battle considering it, but this time, even such a mark didn't appear. Is it because of the level of their martial arts? Come to think of it, that's a possibility. They use some of the most deadly techniques in the plum blossom swordsmanship. Unlike Seol-Hwi, who trained himself with a martial art just once, his opponents trained for years and understood it deeply. So the comprehension they had was different from Seol-Hwi's. There may be more I don't know yet. Seol-Hwi realized things because of this battle. Information and talent take time to learn. How much more was hidden from him currently? He wasn't sure. It's a situation where one doesn't know how far his growth is and how much this would impact his life. Don't get eaten by the system. Seol-Hwi suddenly remembered what the AI Seol-Hwi had told him. A warning. In other words, it means that he shouldn't just accept what was shown to him as enough. Anyway, the goal now is. Seol-Hwi turned his thoughts to his next course of action, Geum Man-jung. He had to be killed. Then what about Sang Chenjang? He didn't have to do anything further. The traces of the demonic sect were left here. The Blue Dragon sect leader, once he sees the bodies of his subordinates, will get rid of Sang Chenjang. A quiet place. There 2 men were talking. One side had a serious expression and the other had an uncomfortable one. I would have preferred to avoid such kinds of meetings. The voice was quite harsh. Geum Man-jung. As the third disciple of Geum Man-jung, he was the one who came to this place in a hurry at the sudden call from Xianxia. But, I'm sorry I called you like this, but there is something I need to check. Geum Man-jung thought he was called because of an important matter, but it was just a personal reason. Seeing Geum Man-jung's face, nevertheless, Xianxia continued talking in a serious tone. All my men are dead, and we checked the cause of their deaths. Certain sword marks could be seen on their bodies. What marks? From the plum blossom sword technique. This time, Geum Man-jung's eyes widened. They showed that he was shocked at the sudden news. Now he realized why he was called here. The swordsmanship of his sect was the reason for the deaths of Xianxia's men. Even someone from the Blue Dragon sect could have done it. However, he didn't understand one thing. Was there such a master? Aside from their sect leader, there are no shockingly strong warriors. That's why I'm asking you. There's no one who knows the plum blossom sword technique as well as you do. Geum Man-jung stared at him. And after a moment's silence, he smirked, stroking his chin. Kek. Xianxia frowned at the laughing man, who just as abruptly stopped. Geum Man-jung had a sardonic smile on his face. So you're suspecting me? He grinned broadly, showing the whites of his teeth. The previously soft eyes were now hard. No, don't get me wrong, I only called you here to see if you knew anything. Xianxia shook his head, but there was still wariness in Geum Man-jung's eyes. However, he soon returned to his old self and nodded. Well, since you lost all your subordinates, you might think so. But this is something I have no relation with. I haven't been out lately, and my Sahyungs haven't been too active around either. I see. Right, and when something like this happens, shouldn't you ask the lower district? They're the experts at sniffing such things out. True. However, those who use the plum blossom sword technique might be more familiar to you. Geum Man-jung, Xianxia. Geum Man-jung slowly stood up from his seat and looked at the man with narrowed eyes. I will give you a piece of advice. If there is a problem, you are someone who can handle it yourself, right? Don't tell me to come and go out when I am resting. That. And, he said, patting Xianxia's head. You know this, don't you? You don't even have the right to call for me. Xianxia's face stiffened. Anything you do needs to be done moderately. If you cross a fine line, you two can turn out like your subordinates. Xianxia didn't answer. He just bit his lip. Geum Man-jung lightly tapped his forehead and then turned around. Xianxia's sharp gaze was directed at him, but he couldn't even speak out or protest Geum Man-jung's actions. Be it martial arts, position, or politics, he had nothing to fight with against this man. Cheeky! Geum Man-jung, who came out of that secret room, spoke in an annoyed tone. After meeting with him a few times for business affairs, today he even called him for his own reasons. This is why we can't work together. I guess I should discuss this with my master. He had lost the desire to work with Xianxia. If the guy he works with is so insignificant, what can he even do? If his subordinates got defeated by the Blue Dragon sect's warriors, how weak were they? In other words, I need to stick with a stronger guy. In front of Geum Man-jung, a strange sight suddenly appeared. Next to the road he was walking, a man with a bamboo hat leaned against the wall. Who are you? Normally, he would have missed it, but today he couldn't let it slide. And the sword which the man was holding stimulated his senses. Who are you? A second warning. The man straightened himself and then opened his mouth while gently lifting up his hat. Geum Man-jung, the disciple of Geum Man-jung, I don't know how old you are, but you go hand in hand with Xianxia. If anyone comes from the demonic sect, there's a promise to work with Xianxia to get rid of them, and the price is to take over the Blue Dragon sect. At these words, Geum Man-jung's expression strangely brightened. Something is weird with my luck today. I keep getting caught up with flies. He picked his ear with his index finger and then grinned. In the blink of an eye, like lightning, he sprinted and stabbed his sword at the man in the bamboo hat. Ching! The man in the bamboo hat managed to block, but Geum Man-jung smiled like he expected it. It's you, the one who killed Xianxia's subordinates. The man in the bamboo hat didn't answer, and that alone was good enough. Ching! Geum Man-jung began his sword technique. If the way he narrowed the distance between him and his opponent was surprising, the swordsmanship he was using now was also surprising. The sword's speed was so fast that it felt like flickering light. But he stopped this. The opponent defended against it perfectly, and then the distance between the two widened. That's right. The man threw away his hat. It was me. Body. Normal health. 4.4 million internal energy, 4.5 million combat power, 12 million Geum Man-jung's information window and info about his combat power. Combat power. Seol-Hwi thought of something. The moment he returns to the sect after his warrior training, a bigger problem will come. In the meantime, he has to increase his combat power. At the very least, if he could figure out how to grow it, it would be of great help. Even in extreme cases, he chose this. If he let his opponents actively use their skills, then he thought maybe he could increase his combat power. Make it possible to raise the opponent's combat power? He knew the risks were great. But if he didn't find it out like this, it'll be even more challenging to find out such things in the future. He could see it happening. This time, it wasn't about defeating the enemy, but about making them use all their skills. The number of illusions gradually decreased until only one was left. This seems quite dangerous, 3 to 4 moves that defend while stepping back, then an attack. And surprisingly, the attack included was the Plum Blossom Sword technique, not another martial art. Well, let's do it anyway. Seol-Hwi held his sword diagonally and took a defensive stance. Geum Man-jung rushed in as if he was waiting for that. Sh-Hing, 1 stab, swish, 5 to 6 cuts. Now, Seol-Hwi followed the movement the simulation had shown him, the third form of the Plum Blossom Sword technique. A mixture of fierce slashes and stabs. Geum Man-jung looked shocked. He immediately realized what this was, and he responded by avoiding it instead of countering. At the end of Seol-Hwi's movement. This time Geum Man-jung also attacked with the Plum Blossom Sword technique. It changed. Seol-Hwi saw it. The Plum Blossom Sword technique which fiercely pursues him and increases the opponent's combat power. Moreover, looking at this, it wasn't exactly the same as what Seol-Hwi had done. Can it be avoided? He felt the hair on his body stand on end. He could think of many martial arts in his head, but he couldn't devise a plan. Then I'll use... The sword coming for him stopped as he chose turn-based. Of course, the warning window popped up. With that in mind, Seol-Hwi decided to give it a try. Choices he hadn't used recently but will give good results. As soon as it was chosen, Seol-Hwi lost control of his body, then began to move freely once more. Swish. He avoided the first attack and then defended against the second attack. Ph-Wish, the powerful sword technique changed. Sh-Hing, Seol-Hwi's body was pushed back by 3 feet, and then there were no more attacks. Seol-Hwi dropped his sword and grabbed his shoulder. Geum Man-jung's sword energy had pierced it. Kek. Geum Man-jung laughed. It was because his attack had worked. He sneered at his opponent. I found it. However, the reaction of the opponent was strange. He was smiling even more brightly than Geum Man-jung. Why combat power increases, a practical sense for martial arts... In other words, it is enlightenment.